My name is Leigh Anderson, and at 35 years old, I never expected to lose the job I loved. After 7 dedicated years as financial controller at Meridian Technologies, I was fired by the CEO's son, Tyler Wilson. He was inexperienced, arrogant, and had been undermining me for months. What Tyler didn't realize was that my signature had more power than his last name. Sometimes the smallest details can bring down the mightiest egos. If you're watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how one signature became the most powerful weapon in my professional arsenal. I graduated with an MBA in finance from Cornell University 12 years ago. After working at 2 smaller firms and building my experience, I landed my dream job at Meridian Technologies. Starting as an accounting manager, I worked tirelessly, often staying until 9 or 10 at night, analyzing financial reports and looking for ways to optimize our operations. Within 3 years, I was promoted to financial controller, overseeing all financial operations for this rapidly growing tech company. My boss, Robert Wilson, was a self-made entrepreneur who had built Meridian from a small startup in his garage to a company valued at over $300 million. Unlike many CEOs I'd encountered, Robert actually valued financial expertise. He understood that behind every successful tech innovation was a solid financial foundation. We had a great professional relationship. He respected my judgment and I respected his vision. "Leigh, you're the reason we've been able to grow so steadily," Robert once told me after I had restructured our debt to save the company millions in interest payments. Most of these tech wizards don't understand that cash flow matters more than cool features. Under our partnership, Meridian had grown from a mid-sized company with 80 employees to an industry leader with over 400 staff across 3 states. We specialized in security software for financial institutions, and our reputation for reliability was unmatched. I took pride in knowing that my financial stewardship had helped make that possible. The executive team was tight-knit. Sarah Johnson, our HR director, had become one of my closest friends. We often joked that between her knowledge of the people and my knowledge of the numbers, we knew everything worth knowing about Meridian. Michael Peterson, our legal counsel, was meticulous and cautious, qualities I respected. He often praised my attention to detail, saying it made his job easier when every financial decision was properly documented. There was also Diane Baker, a board member who had taken a particular interest in my career. As one of the few women in leadership, she had become something of a mentor to me. "The financial world needs more women who aren't afraid to stand their ground," she'd tell me during our occasional lunch meetings. Before Tyler arrived, the culture at Meridian was collaborative and merit-based. People were recognized for their contributions regardless of their title or tenure. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. Innovation was encouraged, but always with proper oversight and controls. That balance was what made us successful. For months, I had been working on a major acquisition deal that would allow Meridian to expand into the European market. We were planning to acquire a smaller but well-established security firm based in London, valued at around $40 million. It was the biggest deal in company history, and I had been meticulously preparing the financial strategy, conducting due diligence, and setting up the financing structure. This deal was going to be my crowning achievement at Meridian. Then came the announcement that changed everything. During a company-wide meeting, Robert proudly introduced his son Tyler Wilson, a 26-year-old MBA graduate from Harvard with 0 real-world experience. "I'm thrilled to announce that Tyler will be joining our executive team as Special Projects Director," Robert announced, beaming with paternal pride. "He'll be working closely with various departments to bring fresh perspectives and help take Meridian to the next level." Tyler stood at the podium, confident in his tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "I'm excited to work with all of you," he said with a practiced smile. "I've got some big ideas that I think will revolutionize how we do business." Despite my concerns about nepotism, I tried to remain optimistic. Maybe he really did have innovative ideas. Maybe his fresh perspective would be valuable. Maybe the Harvard MBA had taught him something worthwhile. As I would soon discover, my optimism was entirely misplaced. After the meeting, Robert pulled me aside. Leigh, I want you to take Tyler under your wing, especially on the London acquisition. Show him the ropes. Help him understand how we operate. Of course, I replied professionally, though my stomach was already knotting with apprehension. I'd be happy to. What I didn't say was that putting an inexperienced newcomer on our most complex acquisition to date seemed like a terrible idea. But Robert was the CEO, and Tyler was his son. I would do my job and hope for the best, completely unaware that within 3 months this young man would destroy my career and nearly tank the company we'd all worked so hard to build. Tyler's first day set the tone for what was to come. He arrived at 10:30, 2.5 hours after most of the executive team. He spent the morning having his new office rearranged to his liking, sending the maintenance staff back and forth with different requests. By lunchtime, he still hadn't bothered to introduce himself to any of the department heads, except to ask Sarah from HR to expedite some paperwork for his company car. Our first private meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock that afternoon. I had prepared a comprehensive overview of the London acquisition, complete with financial projections, risk assessments, and integration timelines. I arrived at his office precisely on time, only to wait 20 minutes while he finished a personal phone call. "Sorry about that," he said without sounding sorry at all. "Friend from business school just landed a sweet gig at Goldman." I smiled politely and began my presentation. I hadn't gotten through the first 3 slides when Tyler interrupted. "This is all pretty basic stuff, Leigh. I covered international acquisitions extensively at Harvard. Let's skip ahead to the more complex aspects." I paused slightly, taken aback. "Sure, Tyler. But I think it's important to establish a shared understanding of where we are in the process before diving deeper." He waved his hand dismissively. "I've already reviewed all the documents. Your approach is too conservative. We should be leveraging this acquisition more aggressively." For the next hour, Tyler proceeded to critique every aspect of the acquisition strategy I had spent months developing without offering any substantive alternatives. His critiques weren't even particularly insightful, mostly vague suggestions about thinking bigger and disrupting the market. The following week, I was scheduled to present our acquisition progress to the executive team. I had meticulously updated my slides based on the latest developments and was confident in my presentation. 5 minutes in, Tyler raised his hand. "If I could just jump in here," he said, not waiting for permission. "I think we need to reconsider our entire approach to this acquisition." For the next 20 minutes, Tyler dominated the meeting, presenting ideas that contradicted our established strategy. Some of his suggestions would have violated regulatory requirements, while others simply made no financial sense. But he presented them with such confidence that several team members seemed impressed. After the meeting, Robert congratulated Tyler on his fresh thinking and instructed me to incorporate his ideas into our strategy. "But Robert, some of those suggestions could put us at significant regulatory risk," I explained privately in his office. "Leigh, I know you're thorough, and that's what makes you great at your job. But sometimes we need to take risks to grow. Work with Tyler, find a middle ground. Help him learn the ropes while keeping us safe." This became a pattern over the next few weeks. Tyler would make bold, often impractical suggestions, and I would be tasked with making them work or explaining why they wouldn't. It was exhausting and frustrating, but I remained professional. Then came the request that truly alarmed me. Tyler asked for full access to our financial systems, including authorization capabilities that were typically reserved for the CFO and controller. "I need to be able to move quickly on opportunities related to the acquisition," he explained. "Waiting for approvals slows everything down." I expressed my concerns to Robert, explaining that our system of checks and balances was essential for financial security. "Leigh, I understand your concerns, but Tyler is family. He has the company's best interests at heart. Grant him the access, but perhaps with some reasonable limits." Reluctantly, I set Tyler up with partial access, allowing him to view most financial information but maintaining approval requirements for significant transactions. It was a compromise that left neither of us happy. Within days, Tyler began making financial decisions that raised red flags. He authorized a $50,000 payment to a market research consultant I'd never heard of with very little documentation. He reclassified certain expenses in ways that made our quarterly numbers look better, but weren't entirely accurate. Each time I documented the issues and attempted to address them with him directly. "You need to loosen up," he told me, during one particularly tense conversation. "This is how business works in the real world, not just in your spreadsheets." I began keeping meticulous records of every questionable decision, every override of standard procedure, and every dismissive comment. Something didn't feel right, and my years of financial experience had taught me to trust those instincts. Sarah from HR caught me in the break room one afternoon, concern evident on her face. "Leigh, I thought you should know. Tyler's been talking about you to other department heads." Nothing explicit, just comments about the finance department being stuck in the past and needing fresh leadership. My stomach dropped. "He's trying to undermine me." Sarah nodded grimly. "Just watch your back. Document everything." My anxiety grew, but so did my determination. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about protecting a company I had helped build, about maintaining the financial integrity that had made Meridian successful. If Tyler wanted a battle, he would find that I was well armed with facts, figures, and an unshakable commitment to doing things right. What made the situation even more frustrating was how Tyler charmed everyone else. With other executives, he was all smiles and collaboration. He remembered their spouses' names and asked about their children. He brought coffees and lunch orders. To the outside observer, he was the perfect addition to the team, a young innovator with respect for the existing culture. Only with me did he drop the facade, revealing the arrogant, dismissive attitude that made my daily work life increasingly difficult. I was being targeted, and we both knew it. What I didn't know yet was how far Tyler was willing to go to remove me from his path. 3 weeks after Tyler's arrival, I arrived at work to find a company-wide email announcing that Tyler would now be leading the London acquisition project. There was no prior discussion with me, no transition meeting scheduled, nothing but a cheerful announcement praising his innovative approach and fresh perspective. I sat at my desk staring at my computer screen in disbelief. 7 months of my work taken over with a single email. When I checked my calendar, I saw a meeting titled Acquisition Strategy Update scheduled for that afternoon in the main conference room. A meeting I hadn't been informed about until this moment. When I entered the conference room, it was already full. The executive team, several board members, and representatives from our legal and marketing departments were seated around the table. Tyler stood at the head, remote control in hand, ready to begin his presentation. "Ah, Leigh, glad you could join us," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I was just about to walk everyone through our new direction for the London acquisition." Our new direction. Not my project anymore. Ours with him clearly in charge. I took the only remaining seat in the far corner away from the main table, feeling like a spectator rather than a key stakeholder. For the next hour, Tyler presented what was essentially my acquisition plan with a few superficial changes. He had relabeled my conservative growth projections as baseline and added an accelerated growth scenario that showed revenues doubling within a year of acquisition, a projection that had no basis in reality. He spoke confidently about synergies and market disruption, without providing any concrete implementation plans. When questioned about financial details by one of the board members, Tyler glanced at me and said, "Leigh's team will work out the specifics, of course. That's what they're good at. The vision and strategy are what matter at this stage." I bit my tongue, maintaining my professional demeanor while seething inside. After the meeting, I requested a private conversation with Tyler. "Most of what you presented was from my original plan," I said, once we were alone in his office. "The growth projections you added are completely unrealistic." Tyler leaned back in his chair, smirking. "The board loved it, though. That's the difference between us, Leigh. You think small. I think big. And people respond to big thinking." "There's a difference between ambitious goals and misleading projections," I replied. "What you presented borders on misrepresentation to the board." His smile faded. "Be careful, Leigh. My father may value your caution, but I find it tiresome. Remember that the company structure is changing. You might want to consider whether your skills are still a good fit for where Meridian is headed." It was a thinly veiled threat, and we both knew it. That evening, I stayed late reviewing the acquisition documents and financial projections. What I discovered alarmed me even more. Tyler had already begun changing our official financial projections in the system, adjusting revenue forecasts upward and minimizing projected integration costs. The changes made the acquisition look significantly more profitable in the short term, which would please the board and shareholders, but they weren't accurate. I immediately began creating backup records of the correct figures and documenting all the changes Tyler had made. If these projections were presented to the London company or to regulatory agencies, they could constitute fraud. The next day, I confronted Tyler with printouts of the original projections and his modified versions. "These changes misrepresent the financial reality of this acquisition," I said, laying the papers on his desk. "I can't allow these figures to be used in official communications or filings." Tyler's face hardened. "You work for Meridian Lee. These projections have been approved by leadership, which means they're official. They haven't been approved by me, and as financial controller, my signature is required on all financial documents of this magnitude." He stood up, towering over me. "Let me make something very clear. If you become an obstacle to this acquisition, your position at Meridian will become untenable. My father respects you, but he trusts me. Think very carefully about your next steps." I left his office shaking not from fear but from rage. I went straight to Robert's office only to find he was out for the day at an industry conference. I emailed him requesting an urgent meeting upon his return and attached documentation of the changed projections. When we finally met 2 days later, Robert seemed distracted and uncomfortable. "Leigh, I understand your concerns, but Tyler assures me that these projections represent an aggressive but achievable scenario. He's bringing a more entrepreneurial approach to our financial planning." "Robert, these aren't aggressive projections. They're fictional. If we present these numbers to regulators or use them to secure financing, we could be liable for fraud." Robert sighed. "Look, I know you and Tyler have different approaches. Perhaps this is just a personality conflict. I need you both to find a way to work together. Tyler has some bold ideas, and your financial expertise can help refine them." It was clear that Robert wasn't going to intervene. His blind spot where Tyler was concerned was too significant. I left his office feeling defeated but more determined than ever to protect the company, even if it meant protecting it from the CEO's son. That afternoon, I met with Sarah and Michael in a coffee shop several blocks from the office. I needed allies and advice. "He's systematically undermining me," I explained after sharing the details. "And now he's manipulating financial data which crosses a legal line." Michael frowned as he reviewed the documents I'd brought. "This is concerning. These projections could definitely cause legal issues if they're presented as factual to investors or regulators." "What should I do?" Robert won't listen. "Document everything," Michael advised. "Every change, every conversation, every email. If this escalates, you'll need a clear paper trail." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "And watch your back. Tyler's making allies throughout the company. Make sure your own work is impeccable." I nodded, grateful for their support, but increasingly worried about where this was heading. The next day, I discovered something that elevated my concern to alarm. Tyler had somehow been granted full system access without my knowledge or approval. This level of access allowed him to make financial transactions without secondary approval, a clear violation of our internal controls. I immediately set up monitoring alerts on our financial systems to track any actions Tyler took. It was the only way I could maintain some oversight given his newly granted privileges. I didn't know it then, but this precaution would ultimately save both my career and the company. As I drove home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that Tyler was planning something significant. His escalating hostility, the system access, the manipulated projections, all pointed to a larger scheme. I just couldn't see the full picture yet, but I would soon enough, and by then it would almost be too late. Tuesday morning started like any other. I arrived at the office at 7:30, made my coffee, and settled in to review overnight financial alerts before the day's meetings began. That's when I saw a transfer notification for $5 million from our acquisition reserve fund to an external account I didn't recognize. The transfer had been processed at 11:22 the previous night, long after everyone had left the office. My heart raced as I pulled up the transaction details. The transfer was authorized under my credentials, but I certainly hadn't approved it. The recipient was listed as Quantum Consulting Group with a vague description of acquisition advisory services. I had never heard of this company, and they definitely weren't on our approved vendor list. I immediately called our bank to put a hold on the transaction, but it was too late. The funds had already been transferred. Next, I pulled up every document I could find related to this Quantum Consulting Group. There was nothing in our vendor database, no contract in our legal repository, no prior invoices, nothing. With growing dread, I performed a quick internet search. Quantum Consulting Group had a website that had been created just 3 weeks ago. The company claimed to specialize in high-level merger and acquisition strategy for technology firms, but the site had minimal information and no client testimonials or team profiles. It was clearly a shell. There was only one person who could have done this: Tyler Wilson, using the system access he'd been inappropriately granted, and he had somehow used my credentials to authorize it. I printed all the transaction details and headed straight for Tyler's office. He typically didn't arrive until after 9, but today his door was already closed, his assistant stationed outside. "Is he in there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, but he's asked not to be disturbed. He has an important call," his assistant replied. "This can't wait," I said, pushing past her and opening the door. Tyler was sitting at his desk, feet up, talking on his cell phone. He looked up in surprise and annoyance. "I'll call you back," he said to whoever was on the line. Then to me, "What is the meaning of this interruption?" I closed the door behind me and slapped the transaction printouts on his desk. $5 million to a shell company that didn't exist a month ago. Want to explain that? Tyler's expression didn't change. He glanced at the papers dismissively. "Quantum Consulting is handling specialized aspects of the London acquisition. Their expertise is worth every penny." "That's a lie," I said flatly. "I've overseen every aspect of this acquisition from day one. We don't need outside consultants, especially not at this price point, and any legitimate expense would have gone through proper channels. The business is evolving, Leigh. You're stuck in outdated processes while we're trying to move quickly on time-sensitive opportunities." "Who owns Quantum Consulting?" I demanded. "That's not your concern." "It absolutely is my concern. That transfer was made using my credentials, which I did not authorize. That's fraud, Tyler. Criminal fraud." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like worry cross his face, quickly replaced by anger. He stood up, leaning across the desk toward me. "You're making accusations you can't back up. That transfer was properly authorized for legitimate business purposes. If you have a problem with how we're managing the acquisition, perhaps it's time for you to step aside." "I'm going to Robert with this right now," I said, gathering the papers. "My father is in board meetings all day, and by the time you speak with him, things will already be in motion that you can't stop." "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, Tyler picked up his desk phone and pressed a button. "Security, please come to my office. I need someone escorted from the building." I couldn't believe what was happening. "You're having me removed. You've become hostile and obstructive to company progress. Your services are no longer required at Meridian Technologies." Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Tyler handed me a letter that had clearly been prepared in advance. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to your desk to collect personal belongings, then off the premises." In a daze, I was walked to my desk where I quickly gathered photos and a few personal items. I was not allowed to access my computer or take any company documents. Colleagues watched in shocked silence as I was escorted to the elevator and out of the building. Once in my car, the shock began to wear off. replaced by a cold fury. I checked my phone and found an email from Tyler sent while I was being escorted out. Leigh. Following our discussion, your employment with Meridian Technologies is terminated effective immediately for insubordination and creating a hostile work environment. I'm out. Found someone smarter to handle the financial aspects of our London acquisition. Your final paycheck will be processed according to state law. Meridian will consider any disparaging statements about the company as a breach of your employment agreement. Tyler Wilson, Special Projects Director. I sat in my car, hands shaking with rage and disbelief. 7 years of dedication ended with a security escort and a dismissive email. But beneath my anger was something else: determination. Tyler had made a critical mistake, and I knew exactly what it was. I immediately called Michael, our legal counsel. Michael, it's Leigh. Something urgent has happened. Can you meet me? His response was cautious. I heard there was an incident. As company counsel, I need to be careful about. $5 million was transferred out of the company last night using my forged authorization, I interrupted. And I've just been fired for questioning it. This isn't about employment disputes, Michael. This is about fraud. There was a long pause. Meet me at Westside Coffee in 30 minutes. At the coffee shop, I laid out everything: the unauthorized transfer, Tyler's reaction, my abrupt termination. Michael listened intently, taking notes. When I finished, he sat back with a troubled expression. This is serious, Leigh. If what you're saying is accurate, Tyler has committed several crimes. It is accurate, and I can prove it. I pulled out my phone and showed him the notification alerts I'd set up. I created these monitoring alerts after I discovered Tyler had been granted full system access. Every transaction is logged, including the user credentials and timestamps. Michael studied the screen, then looked up with a slight smile. And here's something Tyler probably doesn't know. You're the only authorized signatory for transfers over $1 million, according to the banking protocols we established 2 years ago. Robert specifically designated you because of your attention to detail. My eyes widened. So even with system access, he would need your actual signature on the documental authorization that goes to the bank for transfers of this size. If he used your credentials electronically but didn't have your physical signature, then he forged it, I finished. Exactly. And that's where he made his critical mistake. Michael thought for a moment. The board is meeting tomorrow morning to review the London acquisition progress. Robert will almost certainly announce your termination and present Tyler's new direction, including this consultant. What can we do? I'm still company counsel, which gives me access to all financial documents. I need to see the actual transfer authorization with the supposedly authorized signature. We spent the next few hours developing a plan. Michael would retrieve the key documents, and we would attend the board meeting together with me posing as his assistant to avoid raising alarms. That night was one of the longest of my life. I alternated between rage, anxiety, and a grim determination to expose what Tyler had done. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about justice, about protecting a company I had helped build from someone who would drain its resources for personal gain. By morning, I was exhausted but resolved. The signature that Tyler had forged would be his undoing. The next morning, I met Michael at a small cafe 2 blocks from Meridian's headquarters. I had dressed conservatively in a navy blue suit, my hair pulled back, glasses on, less like an executive and more like an administrative assistant. The disguise wasn't elaborate, but it would be enough to avoid immediate recognition by someone who wasn't looking closely. Michael handed me a manila folder. I've got everything we need. The transfer authorization, with your forged signature documentation proving Quantum Consulting was registered just 3 weeks ago, and evidence linking the company to Bradley Thompson. Who's Bradley Thompson? I asked. Tyler's roommate from Harvard Business School. Currently unemployed after washing out of an investment bank last year, and now apparently the recipient of $5 million for consulting services he's not qualified to provide. I felt a surge of vindication. So it's exactly what I suspected. Michael nodded grimly. The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Are you ready? I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. We walked to the building together, Michael nodding confidently to security, as I followed slightly behind him, head down, clutching a notepad like a dutiful assistant. No one questioned my presence, and we made our way to the boardroom floor without incident. The main conference room was already filling with board members and executives. Michael directed me to a chair in the corner, typically reserved for support staff taking notes. From this position, I could observe everything while remaining relatively inconspicuous. Tyler entered looking triumphant in an expensive new suit. He smiled confidently at board members, shaking hands and making small talk. He barely glanced in our direction, not recognizing me in my subdued outfit and different hairstyle. Robert Wilson arrived last, looking tired but determined. The strain of recent events showed on his face, though he didn't know the worst of it yet. He called the meeting to order and began with a somber announcement. Before we discuss the London acquisition, I need to inform the board that Leigh Anderson is no longer with Meridian Technologies. There were some unfortunate disagreements about the direction of the company, and we felt it was best to part ways. Several board members looked surprised. Diane Baker, my mentor, frowned deeply, but remained silent. Robert continued. On a more positive note, the London acquisition is proceeding excellently under Tyler's leadership. He's brought fresh energy and innovative strategies that are accelerating our timeline. Tyler stood to present, clicking through slides that showed inflated projections and unrealistic timelines. He spoke with complete confidence, as if the numbers were indisputable facts rather than fabrications. And I'm particularly excited about our partnership with Quantum Consulting Group, Tyler said, displaying their logo on screen. Their specialized expertise in technology acquisitions is helping us identify synergies we hadn't previously considered. Robert beamed with pride. My son is leading this charge, and I couldn't be more impressed with his initiative. The room had a mix of expressions from enthusiasm to skepticism, but no one raised significant concerns. They trusted the Wilson leadership without question. That's when Michael cleared his throat and stood up. If I may interject with a point of order. Robert looked surprised, but nodded. Of course, Michael. What is it? Michael stepped forward and placed a document on the table, sliding it toward Robert. Sir, can you remind us who you fired yesterday? Robert's brow furrowed in confusion. I just mentioned that Leigh Anderson is no longer with the company. And who authorized the $5 million payment to Quantum Consulting? Tyler interrupted. That was a properly authorized business expense for the acquisition. Michael remained calm. I'm specifically asking about the authorization signature. Could you look at this document, Robert? Robert picked up the paper, a copy of the transfer authorization. His eyes went to the signature line where Leigh Anderson was written in a hasty approximation of my actual signature. This is Leigh's signature, Robert said, still confused. Is it? Michael asked. He motioned to me and I stood up, removing my glasses and stepping into the light. That is not my signature, I stated clearly. I was terminated yesterday morning. Yet this transfer was authorized last night at 11:22 p.m. allegedly by me, while I was at home without access to company systems. The room fell silent. Robert's smile froze as understanding began to dawn on him. He looked from the signature to me, then to Tyler, whose face had drained of color. What is this? Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael placed another document on the table. This is a banking verification form showing that only Leigh Anderson is authorized to approve transfers exceeding $1 million per the protocol we established 2 years ago. Tyler stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. We updated those protocols. No, we didn't, I responded calmly. Any change to banking protocols requires board approval and documentation with the bank. There is no record of any such change. Michael continued. Furthermore, we have evidence that Quantum Consulting Group was established 3 weeks ago and is owned by Bradley Thompson, a former classmate of Tyler's with no experience in acquisitions or consulting. The boardroom erupted in confused exclamations. Diane Baker stood up, her voice cutting through the chaos. Are you saying Tyler forged Leigh's signature to transfer company funds to his friend's shell corporation? All eyes turned to Tyler, who was now visibly panicking. This is a misunderstanding. Leigh is trying to sabotage the acquisition because she's bitter about being replaced. Robert looked devastated. Tyler, is this true? Did you forge this signature? Tyler's confidence crumbled. Dad, I can explain. Bradley has connections that could really help us. It's an investment in relationships. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Robert's face showed a mix of shock, betrayal, and mounting anger. He turned to me, his voice heavy with regret. Leigh, I owe you an apology. It seems I've made a terrible mistake. I met his gaze steadily. Yes, you did. But right now we need to focus on recovering those funds and ensuring the company's stability. The signature that Tyler had so carelessly forged had become the evidence that would destroy his career and nearly brought down the company he had hoped to inherit. In his arrogance, he never imagined that a simple line of ink would be his undoing. The boardroom descended into chaos. Board members demanded explanations, voices raised in anger and disbelief. Tyler attempted to talk over everyone, his explanations becoming increasingly desperate. It was a legitimate business decision. The paperwork was just a formality. Bradley has unique insights that could multiply our return on the acquisition. Robert slammed his hand on the table, silencing the room. His face was flushed with a combination of embarrassment and fury. Enough, he shouted, then turned to Michael. As counsel, what do you recommend we do immediately? Michael didn't hesitate. First, we need to freeze any further financial activity related to this matter. Second, we should attempt to recover the transferred funds before they're moved elsewhere. Third, we need a full forensic audit of all financial transactions Tyler has been involved with. Robert nodded grimly. Make it happen. Then he turned to me. Leigh, I need your help to unravel this mess. Will you stay for this emergency session? Of course, I replied, maintaining my professional composure despite the vindication I felt. Tyler's face contorted with rage. You can't be serious. You're going to listen to her over me, your own son. My son wouldn't steal from the company I built, Robert replied, his voice cold with disappointment. Security, please escort Tyler to the conference room down the hall. He is not to leave the building or access any company systems until we determine the full extent of this situation. As security personnel entered the room, Tyler made one last desperate attempt. Dad, this is all a misunderstanding. Let me explain privately. But Robert had turned away, unable to even look at his son. The security guards led Tyler out, his protests fading down the hallway. For the next 3 hours, the board conducted an emergency session. I presented all my documentation, the altered financial projections, the system access logs showing Tyler's activities, the evidence of his gradual undermining of financial controls. Michael presented his findings on Quantum Consulting Group, confirming it was indeed registered to Bradley Thompson and had no legitimate business history. Our banking team has initiated an emergency recall of the funds, Michael informed the board. But given the amount and the timing, we need to prepare for the possibility that some portion may not be recoverable. Diane Baker, who had remained mostly quiet during the proceedings, finally spoke up. I think we need to address the larger issue here. Robert, I know this is painful, but we need to discuss Tyler's legal liability. Robert nodded, looking every one of his 62 years. I understand. This isn't just a family matter or a company disciplinary issue. My son appears to have committed fraud. And forgery, Michael added, plus potential violations of banking regulations and corporate financial laws. We need to notify the authorities, Diane said gently. Not just for legal compliance, but for the company's protection. If we don't report this, the board could be seen as complicit. Robert closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Do what needs to be done. By mid-afternoon, the situation had escalated further. The company's bank had frozen all accounts associated with Quantum Consulting, but only $3 million of the $5 million remained. Bradley Thompson had already withdrawn $2 million and was now unreachable. Police officers arrived to interview Tyler, who had hired an attorney by phone and was refusing to answer questions. The board issued a unanimous vote to terminate his employment and remove all his system access. Robert pulled me aside during a break in the proceedings. "Leigh, I don't know how to begin apologizing for what's happened. I let my blind spot for Tyler cloud my judgment, and you paid the price." "It wasn't just me," I replied. "The entire company was put at risk." "I know, which is why I'm asking you to return as financial controller effective immediately. We need your expertise now more than ever." I considered for a moment. Despite everything that had happened, I still cared deeply about Meridian. "I'll return, but I need full autonomy over financial operations and direct reporting access to the board." "Done," Robert agreed without hesitation, "and there will be a substantial compensation adjustment to reflect both your return and the circumstances of your departure." By evening, the company was drafting a press release addressing the situation. The statement acknowledged internal financial irregularities that had been promptly identified and addressed without naming Tyler specifically. It also announced my return as financial controller and the implementation of enhanced financial controls. But no carefully worded press release could contain the story completely. By the next day, industry publications were reporting that the CEO's son at Meridian Technologies was under investigation for financial fraud. The company's stock took an immediate hit, dropping 12% before stabilizing. 3 days later, police arrested Tyler Wilson and Bradley Thompson. Tyler was charged with fraud, forgery, and embezzlement, Bradley with conspiracy and receiving stolen funds. Both were released on bail pending trial. The media coverage was intense and unforgiving. "Nepotism gone, wrong how a CEO's son nearly destroyed a tech leader," read one headline. The story became a cautionary tale in business circles about the dangers of unchecked power and familial favoritism in corporate settings. For Robert, the personal and professional humiliation was overwhelming. After a week of trying to manage both the company and the crisis, he called a board meeting and announced he would be stepping back from daily operations. "I've demonstrated a significant lapse in judgment that has damaged the company," he admitted. "While I will remain as chairman, I believe Meridian would benefit from new leadership in the CEO role." The board appointed our COO as interim CEO, and in a move that surprised me, named me as interim CFO, with oversight of all financial operations during the recovery period. It was a significant promotion, one I had earned through my diligence and integrity, though I wished it had come under different circumstances. The recovery of the stolen funds was partially successful. Of the $5 million transferred, $3.5 million was eventually recovered. The remainder had been spent by Bradley or moved to accounts that couldn't be traced. It was a substantial loss, but not a catastrophic one for a company of Meridian's size. When Tyler's case finally went to court 3 months later, he accepted a plea deal rather than risk a trial. He was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security prison and ordered to pay restitution. Bradley Thompson received 12 months and similar restitution requirements. Both men's careers in the business world were effectively over. As for me, I watched their sentencing with mixed emotions. There was vindication, certainly, but also sadness for what could have been. Tyler had talent and opportunity that he had squandered through greed and entitlement. Robert had lost both his company leadership and his relationship with his son. No signature, forged or legitimate, could undo that damage. But I had emerged stronger, my reputation enhanced rather than destroyed. My signature, the very thing Tyler had tried to use against me, had become the evidence that saved my career and protected the company I valued. Sometimes the smallest details truly are the most powerful. 6 months after that fateful board meeting, I sat in my new office on the executive floor of Meridian Technologies. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, a physical representation of the new perspective I had gained through this ordeal. On my desk sat a sleek nameplate, Leigh Anderson, Chief Financial Officer. What had begun as the worst day of my professional life had ultimately led to the greatest advancement of my career. The board had made my CFO position permanent 3 months after the incident, recognizing that my financial vigilance had quite literally saved the company millions of dollars and potentially even more in reputational damage. My first priority as CFO had been rebuilding the finance department with stronger controls. I implemented a dual authentication system for all transactions over $50,000, requiring 2 separate executive approvals through different channels. No single person, no matter their position or last name, could move significant funds without oversight. My relationship with Robert had evolved into something more complex than before. He returned to his role as CEO after a 3-month leave, but our dynamic had fundamentally changed, where, once he had been the unquestioned authority, now, he deferred to my judgment on financial matters with a humility that sometimes made me uncomfortable. I learned the hard way that expertise matters more than loyalty, he told me during one of our weekly meetings. Tyler was family, but you were right. I should have listened to you. The company had weathered the scandal remarkably well. After the initial stock drop, our transparent handling of the situation and the clear demonstration that it was an isolated incident rather than systemic fraud had restored investor confidence. 6 months after the crisis, our stock price had not only recovered but exceeded its previous high. The London acquisition had proceeded under completely restructured terms. I had personally flown to England to meet with the company's leadership, explain the situation, and renegotiate our approach. Without Tyler's inflated projections and unrealistic promises, we developed a merger plan that was conservative but sustainable. The integration was now proceeding smoothly, with actual results tracking closely to our revised projections. On a personal level, the healing process had been more complicated. For weeks after the incident, I had struggled with anger and betrayal, not just at Tyler, whose actions were clearly malicious, but at the system that had enabled him, at Robert for his blind spot, and even at myself for not fighting harder sooner. "You can't blame yourself," Sarah told me over lunch one day. "You did everything right. You documented, you reported, you persisted. That's why you won in the end." She was right, of course, and gradually the anger had given way to something more productive, a determination to use this experience to create positive change. I started a mentoring program for young finance professionals within the company, emphasizing both technical skills and ethical decision-making. I shared my story openly, though, without the personal animosity that had once accompanied it. The lesson wasn't about Tyler's downfall, but about the importance of integrity in finance. Documentation is your protection, I told my mentees. Attention to detail isn't just about accuracy, it's about accountability. The program had been so successful that other companies in our industry had begun implementing similar initiatives. I had even been invited to speak at industry conferences about corporate financial ethics and the importance of strong internal controls. In an ironic twist, the scandal had made Meridian a model of financial governance. Our new systems and transparent recovery had become a case study in how companies should handle internal financial misconduct. The very incident that could have destroyed us had instead made us stronger. As for Tyler and Bradley, I had made peace with their fate. Tyler was still serving his sentence while Bradley had been released, but was struggling to rebuild his life with a criminal record. I felt no joy in their suffering, only a sense that justice had been served. The $5 million had never been about the money for Tyler, I realized. It was about proving he could outsmart everyone, including me. His ego had been his downfall. I picked up a pen from my desk, a beautiful fountain pen that Diane and the other board members had given me when my CFO position became permanent. On the barrel was inscribed, "Your integrity is your greatest asset." I thought about signatures, about how a single line of ink had changed the course of my career and the company's future. Tyler had thought my signature was just a formality, an obstacle to be overcome. He never understood that it represented something more: accountability, authority, earned through trust and expertise, a promise that what I verified was true. As I prepared for the afternoon's executive meeting, I reflected on the most important lesson I had learned. Integrity isn't just a personal virtue, it's a professional shield. In business as in life, our word is our bond. My signature had power because I had never compromised its meaning. I had protected its value, and in the end, it had protected me. The company's future looked bright. We had expanded into new markets, our London merger was proceeding well, and our financial position was stronger than ever. From the ashes of betrayal had risen something better than what had existed before. I gathered my papers and headed to the conference room, ready to present our quarterly results to the board. As I walked, I thought about how sometimes our biggest challenges lead to our greatest opportunities. Tyler had tried to destroy my career with a forged signature, but instead he had inadvertently launched it to new heights. Before leaving my office, I took one last look at the fountain pen on my desk. A signature is more than just a name. It's a statement of who you are and what you stand for. Mine had become a symbol of integrity that had saved not just my career, but an entire company. What signature are you leaving on your work and life? Are you building a reputation that will protect you when challenges arise? Remember that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing, it's about creating a legacy that speaks for you even when you're not in the room. Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share in the comments a time when standing your ground professionally paid off in unexpected ways. Thank you for listening, and may your own signature always be a source of strength rather than vulnerability.